look like? Their future, their education, that the broadening, the sort of horizontal bar. These are the types of things that they will need to have. The ability to learn, enterprise-wide thinking. They're going to think about empathy and communication. My two boys play footy on the weekend. And every now and again, the much bigger kid will elbow them. They need to be able to take that. So grit, resilience, critical thinking. These are the sorts of broad skills that they need to have, but they will also need to pick up a lot of skills along the way. So that on the right-hand side is an example. Hopefully they're going to get from RMIT. But then they'll pick up a whole lot of other skills into their list of experiences. Their cone-like shape will have a lot of different experiences. Very conscious of time. I'm going to leave the questions till later and then pass it back to Sean.
Thank you very much, Shani. I think what you have shared with us actually made me think that whether the traditional way of education really improving fast enough to suit the future need of talents. Well, we grew up in an education system that we learn knowledge. And this great man once said, knowledge is power. And for a few hundred years, that's the truth. Many of you may have heard of this where to tap story. In the old days, this steamboat, the engine was broken, and the boat owner hired a few engineers to fix it, and no one could. So he found the most experienced 80-year-old engineer, and the engineer came, inspected, and pulled out a small hammer in his pocket and tap on a red small valve. And the ship came back to life. And he wants to charge $1,000. Back then, that was a lot of money. And the ship owner complained, said, you barely did anything. How come you can charge me so much money? If you want to charge me, send me and itemize the bill. Listen what you've done. And this is the bill he sent. 50 cents for tapping the valve. $999.50 for nowhere to tap. Well, that's a perfect example of knowledge is power. But is that still true? Dr. Bernard Schindelheiser said, nobody will hire you anymore because of what you know. You get hired because what you're able to do with your knowledge. Think about it. You think you know a lot, you learn a lot of things, but compared with Google, do you know better? Maybe Google doesn't provide a perfect answer yet, but in 5-10 years' time, it will. No human can compete against a cloud-based, AI-driven, globalized database. You can't. That's scary, isn't it? But I believe that's probably one of the best things happening in human history. Let me explain why. In the past, when we try to change fields, we have to relearn the knowledge. That takes years. It took the man a lifetime to learn to know where to tap. But now, you just need sensors and computers that tell you where the problem is. And all you need to do is to make the decision. And because of the technology, we don't need to relearn the knowledge we used to. And that's the software barrier for changing fields. And now there's also a hardware barrier. For example, if you wanted to design your own phone case and build it, you have to buy a production line and hire several skilled workers. Well, that's impossible or uneconomical, probably, for most people. But now, with 3D printing, it all comes super easy. As such, changing fields and crossovers become feasible and practical. And because of that, I think humans can have more freedom to choose occupations. Because when the robots can work on the basic things, and we have the luxury and time to actually work on the things we like and we're good at. Maybe a migration agent like me will one day take a job in fashion. Now let's welcome Dr. Jenny Underwood, the Associate Dean of Fashion and Textile Technology at RMIT. Jenny.
Well, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to talk a little bit about fashion and textiles, and I guess when we start to think about the future of work, we start to look at different industries. And it's amazing to think about the different type of skills that you might need. And we've already heard, you're probably not going to just need one skill set, but probably a whole host of different skill sets. And I must say for myself, I would never imagined I would have ended up working in fashion and textiles. Because my first skill set that I learned was around sustainability, environmental and urban planning. So to sort of then move to textile design, and I actually moved to three-dimensional shape knitting. So that became my PhD. And now I get to do, in terms of teaching and research. But my research is incredibly multidisciplinary. I work with architects, industrial designers, a whole host of people, material engineers. So that sort of future is probably something that for you will become quite natural. So you will hop between multiple skills. Let's make sure. So when we think of fashion and textile industry, it's traditionally, when we go back 200 years to the first industrial revolution, it was very skill-based. It was very labour-intensive. Today, we're in a world where automation is taking over. We can sew a t-shirt in 22 seconds, or a sew bot can. That suddenly has a really profound impact in terms of the way the whole supply chain of the fashion and textiles operates. But perhaps in the future, we need to think quite radically different. Rather than just thinking in a linear way, in terms of how we use our materials, we have to think in a more circular way, so that we actually think about the type of processes, materials, and skills that we work with. When we think about the fashion industry, there are some really key things driving it. And these give you a clue as to the type of skill sets and also potential employment opportunities. So things like sustainability, new materials, how we're going to engineer our materials that we wear in the future. Digital data, the idea that we have fashion data, what does that mean? What is the ethics of that? What is the privacy related to that? Automation, and of course, artificial intelligence. When we think about sustainability, there's a huge lot of work going on in that area, and it's opening up incredible opportunities in terms of employment. So thinking about the supply chain, your clothes pass through many different people, and it's really complex and really hard to know where it's coming from. So there's a whole host of areas that are looking at improved ways that we work with materials, and also the way in which we move materials around the world. Perhaps with automation, it might bring our making closer to us. We also have to be mindful that when we're talking about technology changes, it's also being driven by you. In terms of changing consumers, consumer behaviour is a huge area for fashion. So when you think of understanding what is the mindset of someone, do they want to buy something? Maybe they don't. How do they buy and how do they purchase? They're also asking more questions. Who made my clothes? Where are they made? How well are they made? Are you happy that they're made, ethically? Do you want that? It leads to new technologies being developed and linked. So things like blockchain. We have a whole host of areas in terms of new materials. So it's not only the type of materials that we're going to work with, so whether they're natural materials, they're probably not. Are they going to be synthetic materials? Are we going to grow our materials in terms of our clothing? It also leads to new technologies such as the 3D printer. Maybe the way in which we make our clothes will be quite different to what it's been in the past. Quite likely, our clothes will be smarter in the future. So already, if you think of concepts like the Internet of Things, where you have things being embedded into the material itself, it means that your clothes might monitor and be able to actually be more responsive. Rather than you deciding, am I hot or cold? Your clothes might work out. Actually, it's pretty cold outside. It needs to change to adapt to that. Equally, it will link to a more personal experience. Likewise, we might be growing our clothes. There's a whole host of work going on in the area of biomaterials. So when you start to think about how might our clothes be, if we're thinking about things like fast fashion, we only want to wear a garment once or twice. Does it need to be designed to last forever? Maybe we want it only to last for a moment, but we can put it in our garden and know that it's not going to be toxic. The other key area is the amount of data that's out there. Has anyone gone into a shopping centre and had their body scanned? You get given a picture of your body, you've got this data, and then you've got an opportunity you can share it with people. This is an example where you can put a suit on, you can take your photo at home in your own privacy, and then share it with a company to actually have customised clothing. As I said, automation. The sew bots are here. So likely to produce a t-shirt in 22 seconds. Probably the way in which the material choices we might want to change. It means that rather than having lots of people doing manual jobs, we'll have highly skilled people having to be very clever in terms of the operation and working with machines. It will also lead probably to a more on-demand manufacturing. At the moment we work around mass manufacturing. So we might produce 100,000 t-shirts a day, but in actual fact a lot of it sits there and never gets worn. So the idea that you could actually send your data when you decide you want a particular garment and be able to have it produced. It's also leading, thinking about technologies, to far more accessible and affordable. So it means that as a designer, you can, it makes it far more accessible. Anyone could design their own shoes. anyone could design their own garments. You might co-design with someone. You see something on the internet, you like it, you work out what colour you like, you've got your body data, and then you can link it to a small machine. It could be in the back of, at home, or in your local neighbourhood. All of this is changing how we design. And I guess the nice thing is when you think about the image that Sean showed at the start, that top corner was around creativity and social skills. They're really crucial in terms of how we design. We won't be designing in isolation, we'll be designing in small teams. If you think about it, you're going to have to work with material engineers, the electronic engineer, to understand. A person might have to be really trained in terms of understanding consumer behaviour, as well as understanding the technology and the capabilities of what that garment of the future might be. It also means that you might not go into a shop to try on your clothes anymore. It can be done virtually in terms of how you engage and react. Ultimately, what this leads to is that fashion is a growth industry. It currently is $2.5 trillion of revenue a year, and it's expected to double in the next 10 years. It currently employs over 60 million people. Now that is perhaps the unknown. How many of those jobs will still be in the future? But what we do know is areas like new luxury will be maintained. And that idea of creativity working with technology becomes a really incredible opportunity. When we think about technology, and you as a consumer, you're about to embark potentially on a long career, you could be doing multiple things in your career, it's worth considering that it's society that really is about transforming, and it uses that technology to transform. It means that when we think about what is our clothing and our fashions of the future, they'll be a reflection of our society. It means when we're thinking about the type of skill sets, yes, you need technical skills, a whole host, and that concept of lifelong learning. But it needs to be combined with things like creativity, critical thinking. I think you're going to hear these terms a few times tonight. Collaboration and teamwork. The idea of having empathy and being able to work with people. So that group work becomes incredibly important. And ultimately flexibility. The type of thing that you might be doing today, you certainly won't be doing in a couple of years' time, and you won't be doing it in 5 years' time. The job that you have in 5 to 10 years possibly doesn't exist yet, but it's coming. That can be scary, but it can also be incredibly exciting to think about what is the future in terms of those employment opportunities. So ultimately, by having those things like strong problem solving and interpersonal skills can really set you up for a career that could take you across any industry effectively. So thank you.
Shamika told us many jobs will disappear, and Ginny told us many jobs will be created. They're probably both true. Well, the three hottest technology we're facing today and we talk about are, the first one, artificial intelligence. So with artificial intelligence, it doesn't just play the game of Go, which, it also can be used in translation, self-driving cars. It can also become a personal assistant, can be a lawyer even, news reporter, financial analyst. It can do all of that. It's probably not doing a perfect job now, but soon it will. And the second technology is 5G. 5G is different from all the other Gs. The first generation 1G is about talk while move. And the second G is about texting. You can start sending SMS. The 3G brings us broadband network, that puts us on mobile internet onto the table. And 4G really enables us to stream videos and enjoy the full multimedia experience like the TikTok, you see. But 5G is different from all of that. 5G is about connecting everything real time without lag. And suddenly with that technology, all of the fancy terms we have heard, virtual reality, drones, and many other terms will suddenly make sense. With the 5G technology, a surgery can be performed halfway around the world with a surgeon halfway around the world because it's real time. How exciting. But all of that probably won't change our society as much as blockchain does. Blockchain doesn't equal to Bitcoin, can I just remind you that? And what blockchain does is that it really changes the way of cooperation and coordination. It creates new jobs, it creates new industries, it creates new way of form of organizations. And now, very excited, let's hear from the expert, the head of Blockchain Innovation Hub of RMIT, Professor Jason Ports.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you all for coming out. It's super excited to be here. This is a really interesting topic. Now, as Sean mentioned, I'm an economist. I head up a research lab that specializes in blockchain. What economists spend a lot of time thinking about the future of work and the future of technology. But the reason we do this is what we're interested in is this question of, so a deeper question. I'm not so much going to talk to you about why or what new jobs are coming. I want to dig into the question of why new jobs are coming. And for economists, the basic answer is jobs evolve. There's job destruction, that's a good thing, right? It's the bad jobs that get destroyed. That creates space for new jobs to come along. It's an evolutionary process of continuous job creation, job destruction. What the previous speakers have indicated to you is this process is accelerating. That's the world we live in now. So we have to sort of prepare for this. But this has always been the case. We've always had job creation, job destruction. Right, why does that happen? Job creation, job destruction happens because the economy evolves. New sort of knowledge is created, new niches appear in the economy. Why does that happen? Because of new technologies, right? So it is new technologies that drive economic evolution, which cause job creation, destruction of opportunities for new work. Now, I'll talk about blockchain, and the reason I want to do this is there's lots of new technologies happen all the time. Thousands every year are invented. Blockchain is a special one. It's like electricity or the internet in the sense that it's a general purpose technology that fundamentally will change the economy. It will make it better and more interesting in all sorts of ways, but it will be a creative, destructive process, and that's what I sort of want to talk through how that works. So, I head up a research center. This is one of the things we're sort of trying to focus on. It's not just what is blockchain, how does it work, but what will be the impact on the economy in this space. So, I'll go through a few things. It's a relatively new technology. I'm not going to presume you all understand it or have a lot of experience with this. So I'll walk you through what it is in this sort of the 6-minute version of this, and then we'll talk about what this is going to do for the economy and jobs. All right, what is it? Blockchain is the technology behind Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. But cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin aren't the interesting part of the story. The interesting part of the story is blockchain. And to understand what that is, this is a new technology that is going to change the way we've been doing a thing that we've been doing for a very long time. 10,000 years ago or thereabouts, there were 5 technologies that were simultaneously invented. Numbers, writing, the economy, history, and money. Right? Now those 5 technologies had a name, ledgers. Basically, humans writing down social facts about these are sort of intersubjective facts about humans. Who is that person? Who owns that cow? Basic facts that are consensus about humans coming together and agreeing on social facts. That technology was the ledger or the book. We needed writing to write it down. We needed numbers for the counting part of it. We needed money for tracking it. That gave us economies. The last 10,000 years, we've used that one technology, the book, the ledger, to keep track of social facts upon which we build economies. Now, what's interesting is that we don't even think of that as a technology, right? This accounting or it's just writing. That's not a frontier technology. It turns out it is because of the architecture of that particular technology. For the last 10,000 years, we've used a particular architecture that we've never even noticed was there because there was no alternative. And that was centralized ledger technology. A centralized ledger is a book. A government record office is a book. A bank is a book. Just all of the sort of facts that attest to your identity, property rights, transfers, assets, wealth, all of the things we build economies on use centralized ledger technology. We don't call it that because that would be absurd. So for 10,000 years, one architecture of how we keep track of social facts. 2009, January the 3rd, the first time in 10,000 years that technology shifted. And this was the invention of Bitcoin and blockchain at the same time. Now, there's some technology behind how it does this. We don't really have, this isn't the time or place to go into that. But what was invented then was decentralized ledger technology. Centralized ledger technology, decentralized ledger technology. That's what just happened. That's blockchain. Was this new architecture of how we keep track of social facts. Right? So Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and all of those sort of words, there's a bunch of them there. These are the technologies that go into it. There's 5. They're all invented in the 1970s. We could have had this technology a long time ago. It took a particular weird genius to put it together in 2008. But each of these are the technologies behind it, out of database engineering, public key cryptography, peer-to-peer networking, that's the internet, you know. Game theory, we required a whole sort of bunch of breakthroughs in economic theory and consensus algorithms. Put those technologies together, you get decentralized ledger technology, which replaces the 10,000-year run of centralized ledger technology. Right? So that's what it is. It's a new technology of doing social truth. Right? What is social truth? That's what we build economies on. What is economies? What does that mean? It means when a new technology, how we build economies changes, you can bet jobs are going to change as well. Not just jobs, industries. All right, so I'll kind of just help you out on this. Some of you may have seen that sort of that little gold B coin thing. That's a Bitcoin in the media. That's not a real thing, by the way. It doesn't exist. That's what a Bitcoin looks like on the other side, just if you're interested. But that doesn't work as well. All right, so what's a blockchain? Long technical definition. It's a ledger. It's a new technology of ledgers. What's a ledger? The way the humans record social facts so they can build economies and history and all of the things. So 10,000 years, one technology, we just got a new one. Very, very recently. That's why everyone's confused and excited. Better definition. What is a decentralized ledger? It's a way of using computers, connecting them all up, so that we don't have a single book in the center. We have the books are distributed across all of the networks, and we've got a consensus, a way of updating those books so that whatever book we check, it's the true book. Right? It's a new architecture of recording social facts. The implication of this, though, is that all of the things we needed for centralized ledgers, like banks and governments and so on, and hierarchical organizations, we might not need them in the same way. That's the disruption that's coming. Right? So that's blockchain, the technology. A bunch of things out of database engineering and peer-to-peer networking and cryptography and blah, 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 blah. So what? New economy. New foundation layer of how we do the record keeping upon which we build economies. That's why myself and my team, a bunch of economists looking at the future of the economy, got so excited when we saw this technology. We're like, wow, this is the biggest thing that's happened in 10,000 years. Now, what could go on? Well, the reason we think this is going to be revolutionary is every other time ledger technology shifted, we got new economies. So for long periods of time, not much shifted, thousands and thousands of years went past. Writing got better, we got more writing, we got more numbers, we got better ways of recording it, we stopped using stone, we started, on we went. Then around 1412 in Italy, a new invention came about called double entry bookkeeping. That was a way so that you didn't have to, a single entry is you have to trust the person that wrote the single entry. Double entry bookkeeping allows you to verify and audit a book. So what? The firm. That gave us organizations, that gave us capitalism, that gave us the ability to raise finance and use that finance to build companies to do stuff. Economies just went on a huge kick from that new technology of ledgers. Around sort of 100 years ago or so, we got better at digitizing. We started the digitization, or the mechanization of ledgers. This is companies like IBM and so on, the thing that we own from that. What did that give us? Globalization. Right? When ledger technology changes, economies change at a fundamental level. January the 3rd, 2009, ledger technologies just changed again. Right? So our lifetimes, we're going to be dealing with the implications of this. All right, so what does that mean? It's the computer science, database engineering, peer-to-peer networking, economics, technology. It's new economic infrastructure just got, or the technology for this just got built. Right, so we're still figuring out how to turn this into next generation economic infrastructure. Economic infrastructure is things, you normally think of that as roads and ports and sort of phone lines, and so physical infrastructure through which goods and services flow. This is administrative infrastructure for recording contracts, payments, identity, verification, auditing, compliance, tax records. All of the sort of administrative infrastructure, the way in which we can do that just shifted. Now, we haven't done it yet. It's only happened 10 years ago. And that's very, very recent in the space. But the implication here is this is a new foundational infrastructural layer upon which we will build not just the next generation of economy, but everything that is digital in the economy will live on this. Because it will need record keeping about who is that machine? When did that machine talk to the other one? What assets is it on top? So another way of thinking of blockchain is third generation of the internet. First generation was communication. Right? Email, basically, was, for the first 40 years, email was the high point, and that was an awesome thing. It was digital communication. The next generation of the internet was threading that together and building communication into social communication. Right? That's Facebook and Google and so on was the next generation. The problem with those two things was that was awesome for communication. But the one thing the internet could never do, by the very definition of how it does communication, how the internet works is when you send an email, you're not sending the email, putting it in a thing and sending it, you're copying it. You've still got the email once you've sent it. That's proof that it wasn't sending, it's copying. That's fantastic for communication. Massively lowered the cost of dissemination of information revolution. The problem was that's horrible for money. If you send the money and you've still got the money, you just broke money. That's money that really doesn't work. So I'll just keep saying that. That's the best money. Money doesn't work that way. You need secure scarcity. It also doesn't work for contracts, identity records, anything where you need to know when it has changed. You need to have a controlled version over that. That's what all of those ledgers were doing. There's registries of who owns this cow, who is that person. Right? You can't have them on the internet because you need version control and auditing and checking. What is blockchain? We just did it. We just created digital scarcity, a way of creating a record such that when I send my digital object, I don't have it anymore. I sent it, I didn't copy it. Right? That's what blockchain does, that's all it does. But upon that, we can put entire economies natively on the internet digitally. That's what's just happened, which means that any technology that builds on digital platforms, such as autonomous vehicles and so on, those things cannot just be cannot just be physically autonomous, navigating around. They're now economically autonomous. They can contract, they can prove identity and ownership and so on. So, Internet of Value. We've now got, for the first time, a way of building, this is a digital internet platform that works in an economy, not just works as a communication protocol. Again, that's what just changed. What is cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin? The first use case of money being there. Right? That's just the beginning. And by far the least interesting part of it. Probably the most interesting part is just registries and other sorts of records and contracts and so on. So what that means, what is blockchain? Digital assets move to the internet. Everything. Right? Cryptocurrency is money doing that, but then we'll move all the other assets. We'll start with stocks, bonds, we'll move through property titles, registries. Those are the big ones. Then we'll move down to the smaller things. We'll do data. Data will have property rights. We'll be able to buy and sell data, data markets. Intellectual property, and on that goes. What just happened? Now it's international and global. So we've just globalized and we've just created a new type of globalization. Digital assets just on the internet, whereas the internet everywhere. It's not in Australia or in China, it's everywhere. Securities, knowledge, everything. All right, so this is time. All right. One example of this, just to sort of lock down what this means. Who benefits from this? The humans benefit. Awesome for the humans. Also good for the robots. For the problem with robots and drones and all of the autonomous vehicles we've been building right now is we've gotten really good at the engineering of their navigation in the world. We're getting there with that. A bunch of awesome technologies combined. As I said before, the limit there is that those things haven't had an emancipation yet. We still own them, control them. They still need a human in the loop, not just for the override of control, but to do the contracting, to do the ownership and so on. But that might change in some really interesting ways, in the sense that blockchain technology can enable a autonomous whatever to do identity. At the moment, only humans have identity. We've got passports and driver's license. I can prove who I am in a digital context. If they can do identity, they can hold assets, which means they can have legal liability and ownership, which means they can contract. They can start making payments. What might that look like? A self-owning taxi. It owns itself. When it needs repair, it contracts a human to fix itself. What does it pay with? Say cryptocurrencies that it made picking people up. Who owns it? It does. Is that weird? Yes. Very weird. But that's only weird because of the way we've done ledgers for the past 10,000 years. We've had them centralized and based around human ownership. All right. We move everything to the blockchain. And all of the things in an economy that have value, we can now create digital representations of those things, and whoever holds the digital representation owns the thing. Right? It's fine. We can do that now. We haven't gone there yet, but that's the things we're working through in this phase now. If you can do that, what does that create? That creates a platform, an economic platform upon which these next generation technologies of Internet of Things and 5G and AI and VR and all of those digital technologies, that powers them up. That provides a huge boost for those technologies. So now we've got a complete digital technology stack, where blockchain is doing the economic administrative infrastructure layer at the bottom, which is providing a series of things that so far we've relied on governments to do. Now, some governments are good at that. Australia one's pretty good. Some governments are horrible at that. Those places tend to be poor. So this is a real sort of revolution in basically going completely around broken, corrupt governments and just building everything directly on blockchain for the economic layers of identity, registry, property, and so on. So huge development economics implications. All right, work. Just in the final few moments, 2 minutes. Let me just talk you through some examples in one particular sector we've been looking at. We're in the process of helping sort of design what we're calling the Australian Creative Blockchain, which is new sort of infrastructural utility for the creative industries. Why would they want that? Well, a lot of the creative industries isn't just creatives doing design. A lot of them is them filling out forms, doing their taxes, arguing over property rights violations, trying to figure out who contracted with whom when they did the joint thing so they can get. A lot of administrative infrastructure in industries is expensive, broken, and very difficult to work with, and nothing more than the music industry. So the problem with the music industry is a global industry stuck in individual nations. The main problem you've got as a musician is finding out who in all the other countries that's not your country is stealing your music, and then trying to figure out ways to bill them for it, or figure out ways to sort of create new business models to create money out of it. A lot of excitement around blockchain by simply releasing music completely digitally native onto blockchain, which means that digital rights management and property and intellectual property are built into the music itself, not a separate service that you provide afterwards. What that means is that musicians don't need managers and record labels and collections agencies and all this other apparatus that more or less takes all of the money that they make and siphons it away. Disintermediation is the word we call that. But the music industry is one of the early adopters of blockchain technology precisely because it's solving a huge problem they've got, which was just music is fun to make, it's hard to make money out of, unless you're a superstar. This is a technology that enables the non-superstars to create a living out of this. Multiply that through every other creative industry that involves teams of people coming together to do creative things. When studying the future of fan fiction, there's another one. Right? So fan fiction, things like Star Wars and so on, if you want to make sort of epic storytelling, you usually have to have a huge organization with the sort of George Lucas or someone at the top. The problem is that business model makes it very, very hard to come together. I mean, one of the things that just doesn't make money, for instance, is fan fiction, just because it's so hard to keep track of who did what when and to create monetary streams of revenue back from it. Again, blockchain technology is a way of dramatically lowering the cost of keeping track of who did what when, because it's just absolute version control, unfakeable version control of records of what happened in a creative product, and then tying that to cryptocurrency payments from subsequent things going forward. So a lot of creative professions that involve people coming together to do complex one-off things together and then needing to keep track of that possibly for 40 years into the future. This is awesome technology for that. We're seeing some slow experiments in the visual art space. This is Data, which is a new online visual gallery that is essentially releasing digital works direct to blockchain, using that space as a way for artists to collaborate with each other on this. I'll finish with this one. It's one of my favorite examples. This is Primavera di Filippi, one of my co-authors. It's based in Boston. And she's developed this also experimental artist, and she's developed this plantoid. Now, what plantoid is a mechanical sculpture up in the right-hand corner, and with a Bitcoin wallet. And plantoid does a little dance for you, and if you can tip it Bitcoins if you want. And what plantoid is, though, is an artwork with a Bitcoin wallet built into it that self-replicates when it gets enough Bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies. It goes out and hires an artist. It hires that artist to come up with an interpretation of itself, a new version of it. It hires the artist to build another version of it. And now the artist and the plantoid collectively own the property rights in that thing. It's an evolving, living artwork. That's where this notion of the artist owns the artwork has been reversed. The artwork contracts the artist to build more art, to create more art, and on it goes. That's a fascinating implication of the way in which, if we think through the topic that we started with, how will jobs shift? Possibly much more than you think they will. None of this has been discussion about you working for a company doing a thing. This is fundamental shift in the architecture of how we create value together and keep track of that. I think it's much more, it's much deeper than just, yes, jobs will change, absolutely, but it goes much further than that. We're about to face, I think, some fundamental shifts in the way in which jobs are even conceived or who hires them. So part1 is an example of the artwork hiring the artist, to jointly create value and that being a collective and well-directed decision. Thank you.
Well, I hope your brain is not burned out yet. Very technical. Well, blockchain actually is more problem, and you can be entrepreneur without much infrastructure. I think that's the key thing. They give you a possibility to create things without too much hassle. Well, now, let's get to the philosophical part a little bit.
Thank you very much. It's a really great pleasure to be here. Coming here, actually, I feel a bit emotional because when I see you, it's just what I look, when I was, 20, 30 years ago, very struggling. I remember there was a long time ago, I was, by whatever luck, people just don't believe I got a job in Australia. That was in the early 90s. And mom just gave me $100. That's the only thing we had. And I just came to Australia. We're struggling also. So I think some of you are these days are much luckier than we were. But I'm pretty sure that you will. I mean, it'd be great for me to share a bit of experience with you. Just cut the story short. Australia has a sort of progress along the way. Over the last 30 years, quite a remarkable sort of progression in the society. I remember when I was, first started trying to get a job, very hard to get a job. So eventually I could land a job in Rockhampton. Anybody knows Rockhampton? That was part of the Queensland, in the tropical, in the capital Queensland, a small city. And I have a conversation with my colleague. I got a lecture job there.